Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about how geography and the environment of an area affect the development of civilizations. Then later on, we are going to be talking about how laws, government, and religions have changed over time. So, the early people of Greece. The first people who were there who really made a big difference were the Minoans. They were settled in Crete. And they didn't really have any recorded records, so we know what they did because they were mostly traders. So therefore, we could figure out why some of their stuff from Greek got to other places in the Middle East and all over Europe. And the king of the Minoans was King Minos. The decline of the Minoans was because of volcanic eruptions, earthquake causing tidal waves, invaders who were the Mycenaeans. And all of these things were really natural because the invaders, of course, they're going to invade because we're people, we want land. And then the volcanic eruption and earthquake, they just destroyed everything. The Mycenaeans, they were the first Greek-speaking people, and so this allowed the Greek culture to spread throughout Greece and other places. They were sea traders, just like the Minoans, so they got around. They had a warrior culture, much like how the dynasties of Japan and China are, because they had their whole thing focused around being a warrior and training to be a warrior. And they were involved in the Trojan War. Their decline was sea raiders, pirates from the north, and also the Dorians. And this is just a map of Crete and Troy and where all the civilizations were. So the geography. It was located on the Balkan Peninsula. The land was really rocky and rugged, and it wasn't good for farming. So the people in this area had to trade for everything they need. This is one example of how geography affects how your civilization is made. So the mountains divided the peninsula, so that means they were isolated. There was one section and then there was another. You had to be a good seafaring people because the sea provided a link to the outside world. So the sea was the only way you could spread. This was a Greek city-state layout, and in Greek society, their city-states were called polises. They were built on two levels. Acropolis, which was the highest point of the city with the temple of gods because that was the most important part, but it could also be used for defensive purposes if they were to be invaded. The second level was a walled main city. It included the marketplace, which was where everyone met and gathered together. And then these are some pictures. In the top left corner is a temple, and in the top right corner there are ruins. Bottom right corner there's also ruins, and then you see in the bottom left corner a piece of pottery that was made during this time period. So the governments. The first polis was ruled by a king, so it was a monarchy, and then the power shifted to the class of noble landlords and warriors. This is an aristocracy. And then trading led to the expansion from just Greece to the Middle East, so people could spread, and then they challenged landholding elites for power, and they began to dominate the city-states. This is an oligarchy. And the continued rebellions and the unrest leads to reforms from the people, and it gave foreigners and more citizens say in their government, which is a result of democracy, which is founded by Pericles, if you're wondering. And then bad times will allow tyrants to rise and obtain power because they're going to have the support of the people, because if they say they can do something, they will do it. The new military methods. The phalanx. This was a formation of heavily armed foot soldiers. I'm sure you have seen pictures and paintings of this, but you're going to have many layers of men upon men upon men. The first few rows will have big, long spears, and they're just going to lower their spears whenever enemies come through. The enemies will fly into the spears, and they'll end up being dead. And Also with the spears, it's kind of like shield, spear, shield, spear. So there's going to be one row of shields, one row of spears. It was really helpful because it allowed us to, well, not us, it allowed the Greeks to invade neighboring countries without the threat of them winning. So they became one of the very most powerful city-states, Athens. And this is a picture of the phalanx. You see the spears, so you will lower the spears and your enemies will just charge into you. What are the similarities and differences between Athens and Sparta? Here is a map of Athens. Well, not just Athens, it's just of the land controlled. The yellowish part is controlled by the Spartans, and the rest of it is controlled by different people. So, Spartan life. They really stressed military virtues and stern discipline. Boys were prepared for military at birth. At 7, they began training. They were moved into the barracks. This was a lot like during the Middle Ages, whenever the young children would be sent out into the forest to fend for themselves when becoming a knight and going through their knighthood. At 20, you could marry, but they still had to live in the barracks for 10 more years. And so, at the 30 years old, you could join the assembly, which was, the war. And at 60, you could join the council once you retire. And one of the things about Sparta was boys were encouraged to steal, because this was just the way that their life was. Just how in China the samurai were expected to protect the cities. Boys were encouraged to steal because this would help them. They're saying encourage themselves. It would because whenever you steal, you're giving yourself a sense of power, and they were trying to show that a sense of power was useful. Women were expected to produce healthy sons, and sometimes it is pretty common. If their wife did not produce a son, the husband would kill them. And they abandoned weak babies or even female babies if the woman already had too many, and trade was forbidden. Athens. The government was ruled by an aristocracy, but the people were very unhappy, and this resulted to democracy, which I said before was founded in Athens by Pericles. The reforms towards democracy. Draco. This was the first Greek legal code, because they needed it because Greek wasn't really unified in their laws, so one city-state would think one thing while the other would think another, and so this would cause war and disbelief. So the laws did not really work. They addressed business and property issues, and that began the debt slavery. Solon. The appointed chief official gave freedom to make any forms necessary to fix problems. This is saying that if you were a chief official and you had a problem, you could fix it by setting reforms. They also granted citizenship to foreigners, which was very cool because this allowed cultural diffusion. If, say, I lived in Athens, but I wanted to go somewhere, say I did not live in Athens, but I wanted to come to Athens, I would be granted citizenship if I came there. They were encouraged exports of wine and olive oil. And the reforms helped some but not all, because there was still a widespread of unrest, which led to the rise of tyrants who was in absolute power. Hystratius. He helped farmers by giving them loans and land established from nobles. He established building projects to give jobs to the poor. This gave them a larger voice in the government, and further weakening the aristocracy system. It was very important because, like I said, it weakened the system, and this means more people will be happy, more people will have something to do. Cilicians. He established a council of 500, which were members chosen among the citizens. It divided Athens into 10 tribes, and each tribe would elect 50 men to serve in council. This was before democracy, but this was where democracy got its rule, got its power. So it broke up the power of nobility, which allowed people to make their way in and just take over. Established the assembly as a true legislator, and it was very important because it allowed democracy to take place. Athenian culture. The Acropolis contained the Parthenon, which was the temple to Athena. They were known for their trades of olives, grapes, figs, wine, anything that they could find and harvest. The women were not involved in public life, and they usually were not educated, and this just shows that even in the old times, men were considered better than women. Here's some pictures of, on the left is the representation of the statue, what was inside the Temple of Athena before it got destroyed. Then on the right is a current picture of the Temple of Athena. That's it. I hope you were able to answer the essential questions and figure out how government and religion have changed over time, but you also got to figure out how the environment takes a big place in the development of cities. Hope you enjoyed.